All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're cutting through some of the noise around these modern weight loss medications. Things like semaglutide.
Yeah, you hear it everywhere.
Exactly. And often it gets framed as like a magic fix, right? Or
Yeah,
maybe just a drug journey. But what if that's missing the bigger picture?
it really is. Dan Hollis, whose work we've been digging into for this, he argues it's not just a drug. Semaglutide is more like a powerful catalyst
A catalyst for what?
for a really personal journey. Our goal here is to explore how this medication might actually reveal what you're truly hungry for. Once that constant background noise of food cravings finally quiets down.
Okay, so we're not just breaking down the science of a drug here. We're inviting you, the listener, on a journey too. It's about shifting how we see weight loss, moving away from just willpower towards something more like self-discovery.
Precisely. We've looked at Dan Hollis's manifesto, that's what he calls it, which lays out his whole philosophy.
And some really powerful client stories too, right? Like that one, the day the food craving didn't come.
Yes, exactly. And other reflections on what his approach actually teaches people. It's fascinating stuff.
So the big question we're tackling really is, what happens in that silence? When the biological urge to eat isn't shouting anymore? What deeper things start bubbling up in that quiet window, as he calls it?
Yeah, what truths emerge?
Yeah.
We want to help you unpack this whole process. It's way more complex than just numbers on a scale.
Okay, let's dive in. The willpower thing. We all kind of know it's not enough.
We do. We've all been there.
But Dan Hollis goes further. He says, willpower was never the problem, which is a bold statement. Most of us have tried to force our way through diets, and, well, it usually doesn't stick long term.
Right.
So what's his take? Why do we struggle so much, especially over the long haul?
He really points to the combination of biology, our emotions, and those deeply ingrained habits, those loops. It's often not about a lack of determination. It's like there's this invisible current pulling you back. And that's where semaglutide comes in.
But not as a magic fix?
No, definitely not. As a tool. A powerful one, yes. It actually changes how your brain registers hunger signals, satisfaction, even the reward you get from food.
How does it do that, technically?
Well, it mimics a natural hormone, GLP-1. This hormone basically tells your brain and gut, hey, we're full. It activates these things called GLP-1 receptors, which are like little messengers all over your body.
So it dials down the biological noise.
Exactly. Which can feel incredibly freeing for people. But it can also be kind of scary. The implications are huge.
That's a really important point. It's not just a drug journey. That narrative is too simple.
Way too simple.
Hollis insists it's a fundamentally human journey. And because the effects are so profound, you absolutely need good support, real education, actual human guidance.
Yeah, his protocol isn't just, here's your shot. It's about insight, giving people structure, tools that work with their biology, not against it.
Meeting your biology where it's at. I like that.
And this connects directly to the emotional side of things, which is just massive in his work.
Right, because we don't just eat when we're physically hungry.
Not at all. We eat
No.
because we're anxious or maybe lonely or bored. Sometimes it's just too much going on, overstimulation, or not enough support.
So semaglutide can handle the physical hunger cues.
It can quiet those down, yes. But if you don't address the emotional reasons for eating, well, experience shows those old habits creep back in pretty fast. Relapse is common without that support.
Okay, let's talk about those client stories. That one about Kate, the 46-year-old mother of three, that really stood out.
It's incredibly poignant.
For her, the biggest shock wasn't the weight loss itself. I mean, 7 pounds in 2 months is significant, but it was, and this is her quote, the craving that didn't show up.
Yeah. She said she knew the rhythm of using food for every feeling, like some people know hymns. It was that deeply ingrained.
And this is what Hollis calls the quiet window.
That's the core concept. That moment when food just stops being the answer to everything. And suddenly, the real questions start talking.
Wow.
Kate described feeling like a ghost in her own kitchen. It's powerful imagery.
A ghost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this idea of grief, grieving the loss of the thing that numbed you.
Even when that numbness was kind of rocking your life.
Yeah.
It sounds paradoxical, doesn't
It
it?
really does.
She said she didn't miss the actual food so much. She missed the signal, the familiar rhythm, even that sort of internal story she told herself. At least I know how to feel full. Losing that pattern was disorienting.
Wow. Losing the pattern, even a destructive one. And then she said, everything feels like truth now. That sounds intense.
No.
Unsettling, maybe.
Definitely unsettling.
Yeah.
And that's when the big questions hit. What am I hungry for when I'm not hungry? Who am I without this constant chase? What's actually left when all that noise disappears?
These are the questions his work helps people navigate then.
Exactly. And his approach isn't about cheerleading. He doesn't give pep talks. He talks about providing scaffolding.
Scaffolding?
Okay, it's about building momentum, not relying on motivation, which comes and goes. It's about recognition, seeing the patterns, not just restriction.
So semaglutide isn't the solution for the emotional stuff?
No, it just clears the runway. It gives you the space to finally see what else is trying to land, what feelings, what needs.
And Kate's changes, they weren't dramatic overnight things.
Not at all. They were small, intentional. Things like deciding not to snack just because she felt sad, or choosing tea instead of opening that second bottle of wine, taking walks that she framed as a conversation with her future self. Little shifts.
That makes sense. It's about building new pathways. Which brings us to another key point. The real work seems to happen after the medication starts, or maybe alongside it, preparing for the after.
Yes, absolutely. And this idea of pacing is critical. You hear about people dropping weight super fast on these meds.
Which sounds great on the surface.
Right. But it can be a trap. Losing weight too quickly, without what Hollis calls metabolic pacing. Carefully managing nutrition and exercise to protect your metabolism and muscle can backfire.
How so?
It can actually slow down your metabolism in the long run. You lose muscle mass, not just fat. And that often leads to worse outcomes down the road, like regaining the weight plus some.
So the focus needs to be sustainable progress, timing nutrition, building habits.
Exactly. Habits that support your body's metabolism, not fight against it.
And this ties into the fact that semaglutide isn't a lifelong thing for most people.
No, Hollis is very upfront about that. It's not forever. You need a plan for what happens when you stop or reduce the dose.
Because otherwise,
Otherwise, the old patterns, the old appetite levels, the emotional triggers, they all tend to come back, maybe even stronger.
so you have to build habits that can actually survive without the medication's effects.
Yes. And he emphasizes starting that conversation about after, right from the very beginning. It's not an afterthought.
Which leads to another really interesting concept, identity over discipline.
It's not just about white-knuckling it, forcing yourself through discipline. It's about building a life and identity where food isn't your main coping mechanism.
Right. He says every pound lost means a habit has to be replaced, not just eliminated. Biology, like with semaglutide, can give you a head start, a window.
But it's the identity shift that keeps you going.
That's the core idea. It's what sustains the change. He has this great line, you don't hold on to weight loss with discipline, you hold on to it with alignment.
Alignment. That feels different. So how do people move from feeling like they've failed so many times to feeling aligned?
Well, a huge part of it is shifting away from shame. Hollis has this whole paradigm of no shame, only process.
Okay.
He's very direct and empathetic. You are not broken. You're not lazy. You're not undisciplined. That's his message. Instead, he says, you're often fighting against a biological system you were never taught about, and frankly, a culture that profits from confusion around weight and food.
So his job is partly about resetting expectations, both for the body and the self. Exactly. Resetting body and self-expectations. And reframing the medication itself. He calls using semaglutide an adaptation.
An adaptation, not cheating.
Right. He says the real cheat is pretending willpower was enough all along.
Yeah.
That really flips the script on the guilt some people feel.
It takes the blame out of it.
Completely. And his whole approach feels more like a conversation, not a prescription.
Meaning?
Meaning it's fundamentally about relationships. Your relationship with food, yes, but also with your own body, and crucially, with the guides or community supporting you.
It's not just a list of rules.
No, it's more like a map, having a guide, being part of a community that actually gets what you're going through.
And it's about starting right, not just starting over.
Yeah, that's a key phrase. Starting with tools like semaglutide, perhaps, but also mindset tools, support systems that are genuinely aligned with how your body and brain actually work.
And doing it with people who understand, starting from alignment, not from shame.
That's the foundation.
So if we boil it down, what's the biggest takeaway from Dan Hollis's work on this?
I think the most profound lesson is that this journey, weight loss, it's not just about counting calories or understanding GLP-1 receptors, though that's part of it.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper.
Right.
It's really about learning to listen to that quiet space that opens up when the constant chatter about food finally fades.
Reconnecting with something else.
Yeah, rebuilding that connection to your real hunger cues, sure, but also to your sense of purpose, to yourself, really.
So semaglutide isn't the destination.
Not at all. It creates what he calls a sacred window, a pause, a breather, a chance to hit reset.
And in that window,
That's where you get the chance to design a whole new system for yourself. It's about that quiet, intentional, slow layering of new choices, new thoughts, new ways of being.
it sounds like the real goal isn't about becoming some totally different person.
No, I think digging into this, it feels like the work is about finally getting the space and the clarity and maybe the support to become more fully yourself.
Yourself without all the noise. That leaves us with something to think about. A final thought for you, listening. If you happen to be experiencing your own version of this quiet window, maybe the constant cravings are receding for you, what deeper truths or maybe forgotten desires might be trying to get your attention in that quiet space?
Yeah. What are you truly hungry for when you're not physically hungry for food?